so what makes you different? And he talks about the what's in it for me as well, which is the how do you make an approach so that someone is interested. So you're looking at a CV, you're looking for those two things. How long do you look at each CV? You said you take 10 minutes to look at 50, so...
That would be the maximum. In some cases we've been able to cut out CVs in under 2 minutes, because there's little 2 minutes. There's little things like poor spelling. You don't know what the person can offer up front. There's generic statements like, please employ me because I have all these wonderful skills, and after you've read 2 of those you're sick of reading them, so you don't read them anymore. There's no hook in there to say, this is what I am really good at. It's always important to highlight what you are really good at early on, so that people can identify this person's worth looking at again. Because once you've gone through the step once, you then get your short list of CVs and you go through another iteration. The ideal situation is you normally interview between 3 and 5 people, because you just can't afford to invest any more time than 3 to 5 people, because each interview will take an hour. You're investing a couple of people's time for that hour, and then there's reference checking, and sometimes there's psychometric type tests that follow from that process.
Right, so, okay, so 10 minutes to go through 50 CVs, sometimes 2 minutes to go through 50 CVs. You're looking to interview about 5 people. All right, what other, so you've got to the interview stage. What you've looked for is, okay, why is this person different and what can they offer me? So now you're looking at investing some time in the interview. I mean, that's a risky thing, isn't it, investing time? So do you have a second look, or do you ring the referees, or what's the next step? What's on your mind? What's the next risk you're trying to avoid, and how do you go about it?
I think it's fair to say for most people who walk in the door, they've actually won or lost the interview probably within the first 2 minutes. It's an unfortunate comment to make, but that's the reality of how it works. Some of the things you're looking for, obviously, is someone's properly dressed, someone actually has a firm handshake. And guys, if you've got a really great handshake, don't crunch the girl's hands in the process, because you won't appreciate it. Also, does the person know how to smile and maintain eye contact, because eye contact is so important in this process. The fact that you might be able to come up with some general comment before the interview starts, whether it be something like, oh, I watched the game over the weekend, just a bit of an icebreaker, because sometimes you just need to get your mouth open for a couple of seconds before you then relax into the interview process. Always important to have a glass of water before you go into the interview, because after you get in there, asking for a glass of water can be problematic if they haven't put the bottle of water on the table, and you'd be amazed how many people don't.
So you what? Dry throat, can't talk.
Dry throat, can't talk. You don't want to go in there coughing, because again, it's just something you've got to show your best form when you're at the interview, because if you don't show the best form, someone else will, and you could miss out for all the wrong reasons. From the employer's perspective, they're investing time. If they do make a decision to recruit, they've also got the issue of training and development. They've also got the issue, do they keep you beyond the 90-day period? They've also got the issue, do you fit into the culture, and can you work with the team members that you'll be working with? And quite often that is a very important factor. If they don't think you can work with the existing team, you can miss out on getting the job, not because you're the least competent, but because you're not necessarily the best fit.
Actually, imagine that. So the employer is there. They've spent all this time, energy, money, resource in training a team that is starting to work really well. You're introducing a new member. That's always a tricky scenario, and I guess you want to do everything you can to make sure you get that right.
Yes. From my personal perspective, when I have done recruiting, I've always done the shortlist first. I then work out the issues I want to tease out. So the questions actually often tease out the concerns or issues that I might have across the applicants that I'm going to interview. I make a point of having some early questions. For instance, tell me about yourself. And I think that's very important to be able to have an answer to that. What are you good at? How do you deal with difficult people? There's some very generic questions that come up over and over again in interviews that are there to just get an indication of how people are going to respond to some very simplistic questions. They're the sort of questions that maybe you should be able to answer if you're at a party or you're meeting someone for the first time. The next stage gets into the more technical stuff, and quite often what I find is you've got to focus questions on competency. So there's a new concept been floating around for a while called competency-based interviews. So rather than saying, how do you deal with difficult people, they'll ask the question, when did you last have a difficult problem or dealings with individuals? What was the problem or the individuals you dealt with? What was the issue, and how did you get consensus to move forward?
So yeah, tell me about a time when you ...
Yes.
So why is that so? I feel like I might have an idea what you're going to say, but why is it done that way? How does it work?
It's done that way because anyone can answer a generic question. If you go to the internet these days, or even the library, and take out an interview book, they'll have the stock standard questions that you need answers to. But what people are testing is, what life experience do you have? And life experience for a job seeker is not necessarily on the job. It could be what you did at the rugby club, what you did when you had a problem with a member of the family, or when you had an issue dealing with a shop to get a refund. So don't just think it has to be job related, because quite often I have used circumstances in the past, or examples in the past, which have not been specifically work related when I haven't had a work related example to give.
So sorry, you're saying that when there isn't a work related example, it's perfectly okay to give another example from another area of your life, as long as it illustrates the same point and answers the question?
Yes, and I think it's important to be prepared to do that, because every time you don't answer a question, it's a bit like getting a cross. It's like getting a wrong answer, and it doesn't help if you go into an interview with 10 questions, only answer 4, and 6 you're fluffing around with no specific answer.
And I know that you mentioned before, you said one of the risks is the 90-day trial period. I mean, that's what would it cost, about on average about $2,500 at least to hire someone, and then if you have to replace them within the 90-day trial period, you've got to fork out that money again. Well, can you give me some ideas? That's a risk, isn't it? The cost of recruitment, the cost of training, and then you lose them before the 90 days. In your experience, what dollars are we talking about?
The figures I've seen most organisations use range anywhere from 25% to 100% of the salary. So put it in perspective, 3 months pay to 12 months pay, depending on the difficulty of the position being recruited.
So getting it wrong is really expensive.
It is expensive, but more importantly, there's also the PR aspect, because if a firm keeps advertising the same job over and over again, whether it be in Trade Meet or Job Seek, or any of the other types of websites around, people start to wonder what's wrong with that company, because that job's now been advertised 3 times. There's something either wrong with the company, wrong with the manager, or their expectations are just unrealistic for the job.
Now we'll come back to the company risks in a minute, but you just made a point that I think is also important for the candidate as well. So we started the show with Graham Hughes, and we talked about finding our passion. And Graham said we don't have to be absolutely in love with the job, and I agree with that. But it does need to meet our needs. It does need to fit our needs. That's the other thing too, isn't it? How does the candidate figure out whether or not they're going to be able to honestly give the kind of answers that show that they're the right fit for the company and the team? How does a candidate go about doing that?
I think the important thing is be honest with yourself, because we all want to earn an income, but the reality is job changing every 2 or 3 months because you've made a bad decision eventually comes back to bite you. And you don't want to be what I call a serial job hunter, just taking on a job in order to get the cash flow. That sometimes is essential, and I've had to do that myself in the past, but it's not something you want to build your career on.
So so it's good to then be careful about the sort of jobs you're applying for, because just like you talked about the company who's constantly advertising all the time, you wonder, well, gee, what's wrong with this company? You see that candidate that's constantly being seen around town applying for multiple jobs. Do companies start to wonder, well, what's wrong with this candidate? Can that happen?
That can happen if it's been obvious the person's being job hunting, and where your biggest risk often is with dealing with recruitment firms, because they get paid for putting somebody into a job. They're not that keen necessarily on finding you the right job, because you're not contributing to their income.
Right. Okay, so you've got the shortlist, you've got your 5 interview people, you've got 3 of them giving you good answers to your behavioural based questions. What are you thinking now?
The next step is normally the reference checking. Now, my experience is no one gives a bad reference, and also there are certain issues under the Privacy Acts where people can't necessarily say anything nasty about you. So reference checking, although important, is critical in terms of identifying whether someone can actually do the job. So rather than focusing on, is this a nice bloke, I'm more concerned about, does this person have the Excel skills? Do they have the ability to do the heavy workload that might be demanded in a warehouse or driving situation? When it comes to the character issues, I think often you've got to try and tease that out at the interview process. And when I was in Australia, we used to have a very interesting concept. One male, one female, and one non-European. It was quite often the composition of an interview panel to be able to tease out all those individual aspects of a person's character.
Right. Wow. So really, you've got the candidate is being spoken to by people with several very different perspectives.
Yes.
So you're going to get a really good picture.
Correct. And we all have different insights, and I think the worst interviews is where it's one-to-one with nobody else present. Because really what it comes down to, if you can't build rapport with that one person, or you say one thing that might be a little bit aggravating to the person interviewing you, you can lose the interview. Whereas if you have 2 or 3 people in the room being there, although it's confrontational, you do get a more balanced assessment of what you can offer.
Fantastic. So we've got a bit more to cover, obviously. But what we'll do is we'll take a short break. We've got Adam here. Adam has created an opportunity for himself and his business partner, who is a fellow student at the school he attends. And part of this is about, okay, maybe you can create your own opportunity here. And we've got a couple of examples of that tonight as guests. So Adam, can you tell us a little bit about the opportunity you've created? Can you tell us about yourself?
Well, me and my friend have we have an enterprise that helps people with computer problems. We are developing a business that for people who want custom PCs or services, like fixing them and stuff. We're mainly hardware related, and you can visit our website at fcad.tech.
So, okay, that's cool. Adam, what is a computer?
Well, a computer is a logical device that completes a task or a process. The components in a computer are similar to the parts of the human body. The power supply unit, or PSU, is the heart of the component. It pumps electricity throughout the system. The next part is the hard drive. The hard drive is like long-term memory. It stores things like the operating system and personal files or media. The next component is random access memory, or RAM. This is short-term memory that stores a temporary process. The next part of the system is a central processing unit, or CPU. The CPU is like the human body in terms of task completion. The CPU collects tasks for completion from the RAM, or short-term memory, and then completes it. The next part of a computer is the graphical processing unit, or GPU. This turns binary, or ones and zeros, to analog or digital signals. Then these signals will be sent to your display or monitor so that you can understand what is happening in pretty pictures. The last component is the motherboard, or mainboard. The motherboard is like your skin, is like the skin on your body. It stops everything from falling out and making a terrible mess.
That sounds pretty important to me then. Alright, so what's the operating system? You mentioned an operating system. What's that?
An operating system is the thing between a user and the components. The operating system these days display themselves in the form of a GUI, or a graphical user interface.
What's the difference between an input and an output device then?
An input device is something like a mouse, keyboard, trackpad, microphone, etc. It's like anything you can plug into the computer. An output device is a device like a monitor, headphones, speaker, or printer, etc. It's like something you plug in and something comes out, like a display or audio.
Or music?
Yeah, pretty much.
Hey, that sounds fantastic. Well, thanks for that, Adam. Hopefully you'll be back again next week. I'm looking forward to that. We're going to have some more on computers, and heck, maybe even I'll be able to use one day.